Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Galactic Alliance patrol ship, Zenith Stream, staring at the star map with tired eyes. 3 months of routine patrol duty along the outer rim had left him bored and restless. The empty space between star systems offered nothing but the occasional asteroid field or abandoned mining station. His crew was getting restless too, and morale was starting to drop. The bridge was quiet except for the gentle hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of monitoring systems. Most of the crew was either sleeping or off duty, leaving only the essential personnel at their stations. Morrison was about to head to his quarters when the communications officer looked up from her console. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," said Lieutenant Kate Wilson, her blue eyes focused on the display screen. "It's very weak, but it's definitely there." Morrison walked over to her station and leaned down to look at the readings. The signal was barely visible above the background noise of space, flickering in and out like a dying candle. "Where is it coming from?" Wilson adjusted her controls and pointed to a section of the star map that showed mostly empty space. "Sector 7G, near the Veil Nebula. That area hasn't been surveyed in over 50 years. There shouldn't be anyone out there. Probably just scavengers trying to lure ships into a trap," Morrison said with a shake of his head. "We've seen it before. They send out fake distress signals and then attack whoever comes to help." "I don't think so, sir," came a voice from behind him. Dr. Lisa Campbell, the ship's science officer, approached with a datapad in her hands. She was a tall woman with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail into kind of focused expression. That meant she had found something interesting. "I've been analyzing the signal for the past 20 minutes. The energy signatures don't match anything in our database." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Campbell touched her datapad and a holographic display appeared above it, showing wave patterns and energy readings. "The signal is using a transmission method that predates current galactic technology by several centuries. It's not just old, it's ancient. And there's something else." She paused and looked directly at Morrison. "The voices in the transmission are human." That got Morrison's attention. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having joined the Alliance only 200 years ago. Before that, they were considered a primitive species that had barely mastered space travel. Finding human voices in an ancient transmission didn't make sense. "Play it," Morrison ordered. Campbell nodded and activated the audio system. Static filled the bridge, mixed with faint voices speaking in what sounded like an old Earth dialect. The words were hard to make out, but the emotion was clear. Fear, desperation, and something else that made Morrison's skin crawl. "Help us," came a voice through the static. "Anyone who can hear this, please help us. But don't come here. Stay away. Whatever you do, don't come here, okay?" The message repeated several times before fading back into static. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed what they had heard. The contradiction was obvious. The voices were asking for help while telling people to stay away. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Morrison asked. "Based on the signal degradation, I estimate at least 800 years, Campbell replied. "Maybe longer. The transmission is on an automatic loop, but it's getting weaker every year. In another decade or two, it will be too faint to detect." Morrison walked back to the captain's chair and sat down heavily. His first instinct was to ignore the signal and continue with their patrol route. Strange signals from empty space usually meant trouble, and he had learned to trust his instincts over the years. But something about this situation bothered him. Bridge doors opened and First Officer Kethfer entered. The tall reptilian saurian moved with the fluid grace of his species, his golden eyes scanning the bridge as he approached Morrison's chair. "Captain, I detected unusual activity on the bridge. Is there a problem?" "We received a distress signal from an unknown source," Morrison explained. "Dr. Campbell believes it's been broadcasting for centuries." Kethfer's head tilted slightly, a sign of confusion among his people. That is most unusual. The outer rim has been empty for generations. What species could have been there so long ago? That's what we're trying to figure out, Campbell said, joining the conversation. The technology is human, but the timeline doesn't match our historical records. Humans weren't supposed to have advanced space technology 800 years ago. The communications console beeped again, and Wilson looked up with surprise. Captain, the signal is getting stronger. It's like something is boosting the transmission power. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. A signal that had been weakening for centuries suddenly getting stronger could only mean one thing. Someone or something at the source was still alive and had detected their presence. Sir, Wilson continued, I'm receiving a new transmission. It's in perfect galactic standard. Put it through, Morrison ordered. This time, the voice was clear and strong, speaking with careful precision. Galactic Alliance vessel, this is Station Omega 7. We detect your presence in this sector. You must leave immediately. Do not attempt to investigate the source of our transmissions. This is not a request. This is a warning for your own safety and the safety of all life in the galaxy. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Morrison looked around at his crew, seeing the same confusion and worry on their faces that he felt. A station that wasn't supposed to exist, sending contradictory messages across centuries. And now, directly addressing their ship, Engineer Pete Johnson's voice came over the intercom from the engine room. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy readings from the direction of that signal. Whatever's out there, it's big, really big. Morrison made his decision against every instinct that told him to turn around and report this to Alliance Command. He found himself drawn to solve this mystery. The idea that humans might have been more advanced than anyone knew. That there might be lost colonies or forgotten technology waiting to be discovered was too tempting to ignore. Set course for the signal source, he ordered. Full sensor sweep as we approach, and prepare the away team. We're going to find out what Station Omega 7 really is. As the Zenith stream changed course toward the mysterious signal, none of the crew could have imagined they were flying toward humanity's darkest secret. A creation so terrible that its own makers had chosen to die rather than let it escape. The Zenith stream moved slowly through the Veil Nebula, its sensors working hard to cut through the swirling gases and cosmic dust. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the front of the bridge, watching the main screen as something massive began to take shape in the purple and blue mists ahead of them. My God, whispered Dr. Lisa Campbell, her eyes wide as she stared at the readings on her console. Captain, you need to see this. The structure that emerged from the nebula was unlike anything in the Alliance database. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but clearly artificial. The design was strange and unsettling, with twisted metal corridors that seemed to spiral into impossible directions. Parts of it looked like a space station, while other sections resembled a fortress or prison. The architecture is definitely human, Campbell said, her voice filled with amazement and concern. But it's wrong somehow, like it was designed by people who had forgotten how normal buildings should look. Morrison nodded grimly. Even from a distance, something about the station made him uncomfortable. The way the metal beams curved and twisted, the odd angles of the docking bays, the complete lack of windows or observation decks. It looked like it had been built by people who never wanted to see outside. Life support readings, he asked. Minimal, but stable, reported Wilson from her station. The station has atmosphere and artificial gravity, but it's running on emergency power. Most sections appear to be sealed off. Any signs of life? Negative, sir. But there are some strange energy readings coming from the lower levels. Sensors can't get a clear picture through all that metal. Morrison made his decision. Prepare the shuttle. I want an away team ready in 30 minutes. Dr. Campbell, Commander Phillips, and Dr. Foster, you're with me. Commander Ray Phillips, the ship's security chief, looked up from his tactical display. He was a big man with short gray hair and the kind of steady demeanor that came from years of military service. Sir, I recommend we send probes first. If this place has been abandoned for centuries, there could be structural damage or other hazards. The probes won't be able to tell us what we really need to know, Morrison replied. We need to see what's inside that station. Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's xenobiologist, joined them on the bridge. She was young and eager, with red hair and green eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Captain, I've been studying the station's design. Some of these structures look like they were built for biological research. Large laboratory spaces, containment areas, things like that. What kind of research? Morrison asked. Hard to say without getting closer, but the size and layout suggest something involving living specimens. Maybe genetic engineering or medical research. An hour later, the shuttle approached one of the station's docking bays. The massive doors opened automatically as they got close, revealing a chamber that could have held a dozen ships their size. Emergency lighting flickered on as they landed, casting long shadows across the empty space. Morrison led the team through the airlock and into the station proper. Quarters were wide and well built, but there was something unsettling about them. The walls curved in ways that didn't make sense, and the ceiling seemed to change height as they walked. The air is breathable, Foster reported, checking her scanner. But there's something else. I'm detecting traces of genetic material in the atmosphere. Old DNA fragments, but from multiple species. They found the first laboratory 20 minutes into their exploration. It was a massive room filled with equipment that looked both advanced and ancient. Computer terminals lined the walls, and strange devices hung from the ceiling. In the center of the room stood a series of examination tables with restraints and monitoring equipment. Campbell examined one of the computers and managed to get it working. These files are incredible, she said, her voice filled with excitement and growing horror. The humans who built this place were centuries ahead of anything we have now. They were doing things with genetics and biology that we can barely understand. What kind of things? Morrison asked. Combining DNA from different species, creating new life forms. It's trying to make the perfect soldier by mixing human intelligence with alien physical abilities. She paused, her face pale. Captain, some of these experiments were performed on living subjects, humans and aliens both. Phillips found a security station and managed to access the station's historical records. According to these logs, this place was called Research Station Omega 7. It was built about 800 years ago during something called the Human Expansion Project. They were trying to create a new type of human that could survive in any environment. Foster was examining the laboratory equipment when she made a disturbing discovery. These aren't just research tools, she said, pointing to a device that looked like a surgical table surrounded by robotic arms. This is a transformation chamber. They were using it to physically change people at the genetic level. As they continued exploring, they found more laboratories, each one more advanced and disturbing than the last. Personal logs scattered throughout the station told the story of human scientists who had started with good intentions but had quickly lost their way. The experiments had become more extreme, the test subjects less willing, and the results more horrifying. Listen to this, Campbell said, playing an audio log from one of the terminals. A man's voice filled the room, speaking in the same old Earth dialect they had heard in the distress signal. Day 847 of the project. The subjects are showing remarkable adaptation to the genetic modifications. Subject 23 has successfully integrated Kryllian strength enhancement with Zephyrian sensory improvements. However, there are concerns about psychological stability. The subjects are becoming increasingly aggressive and seem to view unmodified humans as inferior. Another log. recorded. Weeks later was more disturbing. The subjects had begun to refer to themselves as Apex. They claimed to be the next step in human evolution and have requested additional modifications. Dr. Harrison argues we should stop the experiments, but the potential benefits are too great to ignore. The final log they found was barely coherent, recorded by someone who was clearly terrified. They've broken containment. The Apex are loose in the station. They're not human anymore, but they're not aliens either. There's something new, something hungry. We've sealed the lower levels, but I don't think it will hold them for long. If anyone receives this message, stay away. Whatever you do, don't come here. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what they had stumbled into. How many of these Apex were there? Campbell checked the records. According to the files, they had successfully created over 300 subjects before they lost control. Surviving humans managed to activate some kind of containment system, but it was only meant to be temporary. That was 800 years ago, Phillips said grimly. If the containment system is still working, those things could still be alive down there. Foster's scanner began beeping frantically. Captain, I'm detecting massive life signs in the lower levels. Multiple large organisms, and they're moving. Morrison looked around at his team and made a decision that would haunt him forever. We need to see what's down there. If these Apex are still alive, the Alliance needs to know about them. Stay prepared to descend deeper into the station. None of them realized that their presence had already triggered systems that had been dormant for centuries. Deep in the bowels of Station Omega 7, something ancient and hungry was beginning to wake up. The elevator descended through the heart of Station Omega 7 with a grinding, mechanical sound that echoed through the metal walls. Captain Morrison watched the floor indicator as they passed level after level, each one sealed behind massive blast doors. The deeper they went, the more the station felt alive around them. Environmental systems are activating, Dr. Campbell reported, checking her scanner. Air recycling, heating, lighting. It's like the station knows we're here and is waking up to accommodate us. Commander Phillips adjusted his weapon and frowned. Or it's waking up for something else entirely. The elevator stopped at level 47, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. Emergency lights flickered on in the corridor beyond, revealing a passage that stretched into darkness. Like the upper levels, this area looked more like a prison than a research facility. Heavy doors lined both sides of the corridor, each one marked with warning signs and electronic locks. Dr. Foster checked her scanner and looked worried. The life signs are stronger down here, much stronger, and they're moving around behind these doors. Morrison approached the nearest door and found a small viewing window made of thick, transparent material. He peered through it and saw a large chamber filled with what looked like medical equipment and monitoring devices. In the center of the room was an examination table surrounded by machines, but it was empty. Mid-cells, Phillips said, examining the door locks. High security ones? Look at these blast seals and the thickness of the walls. Whatever they were keeping in here, they really didn't want it getting out. Campbell found a control station at the end of the corridor and managed to access the monitoring system. I'm bringing up the security footage from 800 years ago. The last recorded entry. The screen flickered to life, showing the same corridor they were standing in, but filled with people in white coats running back and forth in panic. The time stamp showed the date as 847 years ago, just after the final audio log they had found upstairs on the screen. They watched as human scientists worked frantically to activate containment protocols. Blast doors slammed shut, emergency lights flashed red, and automated systems began flooding some of the cells with sleeping gas. But in several cells, the containment had already failed. There, Foster pointed at one of the screens. Cell 23. Look. The image showed a cell door that had been torn apart from the inside. The metal was twisted and bent as if something incredibly strong had simply pushed through it. Claw marks scored the walls, and strange organic matter was splattered across the floor. What could do that to reinforced steel? Phillips asked. Something that was designed to be the perfect predator, Campbell replied grimly. According to these files, the apex subjects were given enhanced strength from multiple alien species: Krillian muscle density, Saurian bone structure, Zephyrian reflexes. They were built to be unstoppable. The security footage continued, showing the scientists retreating to the upper levels as more containment cells failed. But the most disturbing part was what they glimpsed of the apex themselves. The creatures that emerged from the cells looked human at first glance, but wrong in ways that made Morrison's skin crawl. They moved too fast, limbs bent at impossible angles, and their eyes reflected light like an animal's. But worse than their physical appearance was the intelligence behind those eyes. These weren't mindless monsters. They were thinking, planning, hunting. The survivors managed to seal off this level, Campbell said, studying the control systems they created. A bioneural network to keep the apex in a state of suspended animation, like hibernation, but controlled by the station's computer systems. For 800 years, Morrison asked. The system was designed to last indefinitely, powered by the station's core reactor. But it was also designed to be monitored and maintained by human operators. Without regular maintenance, it would slowly begin to fail. Foster's scanner began beeping rapidly. Captain, I'm reading massive spikes in biological activity. Heart rates are increasing. Brain activity is rising. They're waking up. Lights in the corridor suddenly brightened, and they could hear the sound of machinery coming to life throughout the level. Ventilation systems began pumping fresh air into the cells. The biomonitors on each door started displaying active readings. We need to leave now, Phillips said, moving toward the elevator. But as they turned to go, they heard a sound that froze their blood in their veins. A voice, speaking in perfect galactic standard, came from one of the cells. Who are you? The voice asked. Sounded human, but there was something wrong with it. Too calm, too curious, like a scientist examining a new specimen. Morrison found himself drawn to the cell door, despite every instinct telling him to run. Through the viewing window, he could see a figure sitting on the examination table. Looked like a tall, lean human male, but his proportions were slightly off. His arms were too long, his fingers too thin, and when he looked up at the window, his eyes were completely black. You're not from the station, the creature said. Your genetic markers are different, more primitive. Are you from the outside? Campbell grabbed Morrison's arm. Captain, we need to go. The bioneural network is failing. I'm reading system errors throughout the containment grid. More voices began speaking from other cells. Dozens of them, all asking questions, all showing the same disturbing intelligence. They weren't angry or violent. They were curious, excited even, like children who had been locked in their rooms for too long and finally heard visitors in the How long have we been sleeping? Asked one voice. What year is it? Asked another. Have you come to continue the experiments? Asked a third. Phillips was checking his weapon when the first containment failure alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed throughout the corridor, and automated warnings echoed from hidden speakers. Containment breach in Cell 17, announced the station's computer, initiating emergency protocols. They heard the sound of metal tearing, followed by footsteps in the corridor behind them. Morrison turned to see a figure standing in the shadows, near the damaged cell door. It was roughly human-shaped, but moved with a fluid grace that was definitely not human. You smell like fear, the creature said, tilting its head to study them. That's interesting. The original humans lost that ability near the end. They became numb to everything except their work. Phillips raised his weapon, but the creature moved faster than any of them could follow. One moment it was standing 20 feet away. The next it was directly in front of Phillips, gently pushing his weapon aside with one elongated finger. "Okay. Violence won't be necessary," it said calmly. "We're not animals. We're what humanity was meant to become. Enhanced. Perfected." Apex. Foster was frantically scanning the creature with her equipment. "Captain, this thing's biology is impossible. Its reading is human, Krillian, Saurian, and 3 other species I can't identify, but it's all integrated perfectly. Like it was designed by someone who understood genetics better than we do." The Apex smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp, and too numerous, were designed by humans who understood that evolution could be guided, controlled, improved. They gave us gifts from across the galaxy: strength, speed, intelligence, adaptability. But most importantly, they gave us hunger. Hunger for what? Morrison asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. For improvement. For new genetic material to study and integrate. For 800 years, we've been dreaming of the day when new specimens would arrive. The creature's black eyes focused on each of them in turn. "And now, you're here." More containment alarms began to sound, as additional cells failed throughout the level. The apex in front of them didn't seem threatening, but Morrison could hear movement in the darkness behind it. The shapes were emerging from their cells, and they all seemed to be gathering in the corridor. "We should return to the surface," the first apex said pleasantly. "There's so much to discuss, and we have centuries of catching up to do." The galaxy must have changed considerably since we were put to sleep. Campbell's scanner showed dozens of life signs converging on their position. "Captain, we're surrounded, and more of them are waking up on other levels." Morrison realized with growing horror that they hadn't just discovered humanity's darkest creation. They had awakened it. Now it was very interested in what the outside universe had to offer. The elevator ride back to the upper levels felt like the longest minutes of Captain Morrison's life. The apex had allowed them to leave, but not out of kindness. They were being studied, observed, analyzed like laboratory specimens. Morrison could feel unseen eyes watching their every move through hidden cameras and sensors throughout the station. "How many of them are there?" Key asked Campbell as they reached the main laboratory level. "The records show over 300 successful subjects, but some of the files are corrupted." Campbell's hands shook as she checked her scanner. "What's worse is that they're not confined to the lower levels anymore. I'm detecting movement throughout the station." Commander Phillips immediately activated his communicator. "Sinit's dream. This is Phillips. We need immediate evacuation. Repeat, immediate evacuation." The response came back filled with static. "Phillips, this is the bridge. We are having trouble with our communications array. This thing is interfering with our signals." "They're jamming us," Phillips said grimly. "These things are more advanced than we thought." Dr. Foster was examining her readings with growing alarm. "Captain, look at this. The genetic samples I took from the atmosphere earlier are changing. The DNA is actually rewriting itself while I watch." Morrison looked at the scanner display and saw complex genetic sequences shifting and rearranging in real time. "What does that mean?" "It means they're not just genetically modified. They can modify themselves, adapt to any situation, any threat, any environment. Their evolution and fast forward." A soft voice came from the laboratory's intercom system. It was the same apex they had met in the containment level, but now he sounded closer, more immediate. "Captain Morrison, Dr. Campbell, Commander Phillips, Dr. Foster," the voice said, somehow knowing all their names. "You don't need to be afraid. We've been studying your personnel files from your ship's computer. You're all intelligent, capable individuals. You would make excellent additions to our collective." "Additions? To what collective?" Morrison called out. "We don't simply kill other species, Captain. We improve them." We take the best traits from each genetic line and incorporate them into our own. Your human determination, the Saurian resilience of your first officer, the Krillian strength of your security team. All of it can be preserved and enhanced. Phillips checked his weapon and moved toward the laboratory entrance. We need to get back to the ship. These things are playing games with us. But when they reached the corridor leading to the docking bay, they found their path blocked, not by doors or barriers, but by the apex themselves. 3 of them stood in the hallway, looking almost human except for their 2 long limbs and those completely black eyes. The discussion isn't finished, said the lead apex. This one looked different from the first, with skin that seemed to shimmer and change color slightly. We have questions about the current state of galactic civilization. Are humans still considered a minor species? Have they developed any new genetic modifications? What about the other Alliance races? Campbell stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. You want to know about genetic modifications? Why? Because we are collectors. The apex replied. For 800 years, we have been limited to the genetic material available on this station. We have recombined and improved ourselves countless times, but there are limits to what can be achieved with finite resources. New genetic material means new possibilities. Foster realized the horrible truth first. Dara not trying to escape the station. They're trying to lure more ships here, more species, more genetic material to work with. The apex smiled, showing those unsettling sharp teeth. Very intelligent, Dr. Foster. Yes, we have been broadcasting that distress signal for centuries, hoping someone would eventually investigate. Most ships ignore it, but occasionally someone with scientific curiosity arrives. Occasionally, Morrison felt sick. How many ships have you captured? 47 vessels over the past 800 years. Each one brought new genetic possibilities. Zephyrian hunters with their enhanced senses, Krillian traders with their incredible strength, Cordon scientists with their enlarged brains. We have incorporated the best traits from over 20 different species. Phillips raised his weapon, but the apex didn't seem concerned. Your energy weapons are interesting, but we've encountered similar technology before. Watch. The creature stepped directly into Phillips' line of fire. When Phillips pulled the trigger, the energy beam struck the apex center mass. But instead of being wounded, the creature's skin seemed to absorb the energy. Its body glowed slightly for a moment, then returned to normal. Krillian energy absorption combined with Vorthan cellular regeneration, the apex explained calmly. We adapted 2 energy weapons 200 years ago when a military patrol found us. Their genetic material was particularly useful. The team began backing away, but they found more apex emerging from side corridors and ventilation shafts. These ones looked different from the others, each showing unique combinations of alien traits. One had the scaled skin of a Saurian, but human facial features. Another moved with the impossible flexibility of a Zephyrian, but had the solid build of a Krillian. You see our diversity, said the lead apex. Each of us is unique, but we share a common purpose: evolution through integration. We are what the original humans dreamed of creating, a perfect fusion of intelligence and adaptability. Morrison's communicator crackled to life. This was Engineer Pete Johnson from the ship. Captain, we've got a problem up here. Q. Unknown contacts are approaching the ship. They are not showing up on our sensors properly, but I can see them through the viewports. They look like they're spacewalking without suits. How is that possible? Morrison asked. The apex answered him. We have incorporated genetic traits from species that can survive in vacuum. We don't need ships to travel through space anymore. Okay? We simply adapt our bodies to whatever environment we encounter. Foster's scanner was showing impossible readings. Captain, their biology is changing in real time. I'm watching their genetic code rewrite itself to counter every threat we present. It's like they're thinking their way to new evolutionary adaptations, because we are, said a new voice. This apex looked more human than the others. But when it spoke, Morrison realized it was using the voices of multiple people at once. We retain the memories and knowledge of everyone we integrate. 800 years of accumulated intelligence from dozens of species. We know your ship's layout from your engineer's memories, said another. We understand your weapons from your security chief's training, added a third. We appreciate your scientific method from your researcher's education, finished the first. Morrison realized they weren't just facing genetically modified humans. They were facing a collective intelligence that had been learning and growing for centuries, accumulating knowledge and abilities from every person and species they encountered. There is no escape, the lead apex said gently. Your ship is surrounded. Your crew is being evaluated for integration. But don't think of this as death. Think of it as transformation. Your individual consciousness will become part of something greater. Your genetic legacy will continue in improved form. Campbell grabbed Morrison's arm. Captain, the quantum cascade device the original humans built. If we can reach the central computer core, we might be able to activate it. What's a quantum cascade device? Morrison asked. According to the files, it's a fail-safe system that creates a localized space-time distortion. It could trap the station in a temporal loop or even erase it from existence. The apex heard every word, but they didn't seem worried. The quantum cascade device requires a human operator with specific genetic markers to function. We have been waiting 800 years for someone with those markers to arrive. The horrible realization hit Morrison like a physical blow. You wanted us to find that device. This whole thing has been planned. Huh. The original humans were very thorough in their preparations, the apex confirmed. They knew that eventually someone would come to stop us. They built the device to require voluntary operation by someone with the right genetic signature. Someone who would choose to sacrifice themselves to contain us. Morrison looked around at his team, at the apex surrounding them, and at the choice that was rapidly becoming unavoidable. The perfect trap had been set centuries ago, and they had walked right into it. The hunt was over. Now came the most difficult decision of their lives. The central computer core of Station Omega-7 was a massive chamber filled with strange organic-looking technology. Tubes filled with glowing liquid connected dozens of processing units that pulsed like living hearts. In the center of it all stood the quantum cascade device, a crystalline structure surrounded by control panels and monitoring equipment. Captain Morrison and his team had fought their way through the station for 3 hours, but they weren't really fighting. The apex could have stopped them at any time. Instead, they had guided the team through the corridors like shepherds guiding sheep, allowing them to reach exactly where the creatures wanted them to go. This is it, Dr. Campbell said, examining the device's control systems according to the original blueprints. Activating this will create a temporal loop that resets the station to the moment of the first containment breach. The apex will be trapped in an endless cycle of waking up and being put back to sleep. Commander Phillips was watching the chamber entrances, but no apex had followed them inside. Why aren't they trying to stop us? Dr. Foster was scanning the bioneural network that controlled the station's systems, cause they want us to activate it. Look at these readings. The network isn't just a computer system. It's made from human brain tissue combined with alien neural structures. It's been slowly going insane over the centuries. The truth hit Morrison like a cold wave. The quantum cascade device isn't a weapon. It's a prison, and it needs a warden. A familiar voice echoed through the chamber, which is the lead apex, but now Morrison could hear other voices mixed with it, dozens of them, speaking in unison. Very good, Captain. You understand? At last. The device requires a conscious human operator to maintain the temporal lock. Someone must stay behind and keep the cycle running forever. But why? Morrison asked. You could have escaped centuries ago. Why stay trapped on this station? The bioneural network itself answered, and now Morrison could hear the voices of the original human scientists mixed with the Apex Collective. 'Cause we realized what we had become. We saw what would happen if we reached the populated systems of the galaxy. We would consume everything, every species, every world, every form of life, until nothing remained but us. Campbell was studying the device's technical specifications. The temporal loop isn't perfect. Tay requires constant adjustment and monitoring. Without an operator, it will eventually fail. The original humans sacrificed themselves to create the first loop. The collective voice continued. Their consciousness was integrated into the bioneural network to maintain the containment. But organic minds break down over time. We need fresh operators periodically. Foster made a horrifying discovery while examining the network. Captain, I'm detecting genetic material from all the ships that have visited this station over the past 800 years. They didn't just study the crews. They integrated them into the network. All of them are still here, trapped in this bioneural system, helping to maintain the prison. Morrison looked around at his team and realized they were facing the same choice the original scientists had made centuries ago. Sacrifice themselves to keep the apex contained, or allow these creatures to escape and consume the galaxy. There has to be another way, Philip said, checking his remaining ammunition. We could destroy the station, blow it up completely. The station's reactor is shielded by the same temporal field as the device, Campbell explained. Destroying it would only release the apex into normal space-time. They would be free to leave and spread across the galaxy. The Apex Collective spoke again, and now Morrison could hear something like sadness in their combined voices. We didn't choose to become this. The original humans created us to be the perfect soldiers, the perfect survivors. But perfection comes with a price. We cannot stop evolving, cannot stop consuming, cannot stop becoming more than we were. So you trap yourselves here forever. We trap ourselves here to protect the galaxy from us. We are humanity's greatest achievement and greatest failure. We represent everything your species could become and everything it should fear to become. Morrison walked to the quantum cascade device and placed his hand on the control panel. He could feel the power humming through the crystalline structure, waiting to be activated. If I do this, what happens to my crew? They will be integrated into the bioneural network, but their consciousness will remain intact. They will become part of the collective that maintains the prison. This is not death, but it is not life as you know it either. Campbell stepped forward. Captain, let me do it. I understand the technology better than anyone. I can maintain the system more efficiently. No, Morrison said firmly. This is my responsibility, my decision. But Dr. Foster had been studying her scanner readings and made a discovery that changed everything. Wait, Captain. The genetic markers the device requires. They're not random. Look at this DNA analysis. She showed him the scanner display. Morrison's genetic profile was highlighted, along with specific sequences that matched samples from the original human scientist. You're descended from one of the original researchers, Foster explained. Dr. Jake Morrison, the project leader. The device was designed specifically for his genetic line. The distress signal wasn't just calling for help, it was calling for his descendants. The terrible truth became clear. The original Dr. Morrison had planned for this moment 800 years ago. He had known that someday one of his descendants would find the station and face the same choice he had faced. The genetic markers weren't just a security feature. They were a guarantee that someone with the right moral character would eventually arrive to take over the burden. My ancestor built this prison, Morrison said quietly. And he designed it so that his family would be responsible for maintaining it forever. The cycle continues, the Apex Collective said. Each generation must choose between personal freedom and galactic survival. Each generation must sacrifice themselves to maintain the containment. Morrison looked at his team one last time. Campbell, with her brilliant scientific mind, Phillips, with his unwavering loyalty, Foster, with her boundless curiosity about life in all its forms. They had followed him into danger because they trusted him to make the right choices. He activated the quantum cascade device, the chamber filled with blinding light as space-time began to fold in on itself. Morrison felt his consciousness being pulled into the bio-neural network, joining the collective of minds that had maintained the prison for centuries. He could feel the presence of his ancestor, Dr. Jake Morrison, welcoming him into the eternal watch. But something unexpected happened. Instead of trapping his crew in the network, Morrison found he could use his position as the primary operator to send them back to their ship. The temporal field that surrounded the station could be manipulated to create a small escape window. "Go," he told them through the station's communication system. "Tell the Alliance what happened here. Make sure no one else comes looking for us. The galaxy is safe as long as we remain contained." Campbell, Phillips, and Foster made it back to the Zenith stream just as the temporal loop activated. They watched from the bridge as Station Omega-7 faded from normal space-time, becoming a ghost, trapped between moments, forever resetting to the instant of the containment breach. Years later, when they filed their report with Alliance Command, they told a different story. They said the station had been destroyed in a reactor malfunction, and that Captain Morrison had died heroically trying to save his crew. The truth about the Apex and the temporal prison was classified at the highest levels, but sometimes, late at night, they could still hear the distress signal if they listened carefully to the deep space communications array. Captain Morrison's voice, mixed with hundreds of others, warning travelers to stay away from the coordinates where Station Omega-7 once existed. The sacrifice continued. The watch remained eternal. And somewhere in the space between seconds, humanity's darkest creation stayed trapped by humanity's greatest sacrifice. The galaxy remained safe, protected by heroes who could never be honored for their service, because no one could ever know what they had saved the universe from.